Today we're talking about flexing our spiritual muscle. So sizzling with spirit does require some spiritual muscle in the forms of focus, discipline, and deliberate choice. But that muscle can be developed just like our physical muscle through dedicated practice and commitment. And this morning we're going to explore the idea of flexing our spiritual muscles. Remember flexing your muscles when you were a kid? Remember, can I see this? Yeah, just like that. Oh, Mom, feel how hard this is. Come on, feel how hard my muscle is. You remember doing that? I mean, that was so much fun. Let's everybody do that. Come on, everybody. Let's feel how. Come on, show me how strong you are. All right. Is it strong? Yeah. Yeah. Could it be stronger? Yeah. I know Allison's going to this body pump class. I got to tell you, she's toned. She's got definition in her muscles there. It's pretty amazing. The strength of this physical muscle, along with our other physical muscles, determines our level of ability or inability to push, pull, lift, carry, to function really in this physical world. Of course, this is not a lesson on physical fitness, but rather a lesson on spiritual fitness. We're not talking about our physical strength or our physical muscle today, but rather our spiritual strength and our spiritual muscles. Sizzling with spirit in order to create a life of ease and joy, a life of purpose and plenty, a life of greatness and love requires our spiritual strength, and it requires us to be able to flex our spiritual muscles. So to set the stage for this morning and to illustrate the teaching points of today, I'm going to use an example of someone who had great physical strength. You think of someone I might use. You may have heard of him. His name was Samson. This is Judges chapter 16. Samson was an Israelite. His strength was so immense that the Israelites depended on his strength to defend them against the Philistines. Here comes. Good morning. Fine, come on in. I was just telling a little story about Samson from the Bible and how strong he was. He was an Israelite, and his strength was so immense that the Israelites depended upon him to defend them against the Philistines. So one day, Samson met the most enchanting woman. Yeah. Never mind that she lived in the enemy camp. She was gorgeous, quite the temptress. In addition to being gorgeous, she was also a mole, to use our language. And her name was Delilah, and she was sent by the Philistines to find out the secret of Samson's most incredible strength. She'd coyly ask him, "Samson, how do you get all of that strength?" He played with her, pretending to give away his secret, confessing things like, "Well, if I were tied with 7 fresh bowstrings not yet dried, I would be rendered as weak as the next guy. And if they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used, then I shall become weak and like any other man. And if you weave the 7 locks of my head into the web of a loom, then I shall become weak." And Delilah, she did all of those things, but to no avail. He was as strong as ever. Now, you'd think at some point that Samson would have figured out that this woman was bad news, right? But he chose to ignore the obvious. Has anybody ever done that? Chose to ignore the obvious? That's right there. Yeah. No, it'll get better, really. I just know. Don't look at it. Finally, she pressed him daily, and his soul was vexed to death, to quote the Lamsa Bible translation. And he blurted out, "If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me and I shall become weak just like any other man." And Delilah wasted no time. That evening she lulled him to sleep and called for a man to shave his head. Then she called for the Philistines, and when they arrived, the weakened Samson could not fight him, or fight them. This part's kind of icky. They plucked out his eyes, and took him to prison where he was harnessed to the millstone of a grind grain. So here's Samson. Eyes are plucked out, he's bound, destined to live a life of servitude to his enemy. But something happened for Samson. Not surprisingly, his hair began to grow back. As his hair grew back, his strength grew back. He got a second chance. One night, the Philistines and their leaders, feeling pretty triumphant over having squashed their enemy, ordered him to be brought to their temple so that they could mock him. They ordered him to stand between two pillars that supported the temple. Samson called to God, "Remember me and strengthen me." He reached out his arms and with every ounce of his renewed power brought the temple down, killing all of those within and himself as well. Kind of seems like a modern-day terrorist coming back there a little bit. But Samson, dying a triumphant death, did not abandon his people. In his final moments, he defended them as he never had before. He had fulfilled his destiny. So that's not really a very pleasant story, is it? It doesn't have that good ending, kind of like that movie you saw. Yeah, not very upbeat. No, it's not. It's gruesome and it's vivid. But that does seem to be on par, of course, for many of the stories that we read in the Old Testament. The Old Testament was filled with a lot of inner turmoil, and it's a metaphor, really, for man and what you go through to realize, as in the New Testament, that the God of vengeance, the angry God, the judging God in the Old Testament is not the true God. The true God is the God of love, and that is what you get in the New Testament. So it's a nice transition there. So once there was a little boy who was studying the Bible in Sunday school class, and he was very upset by a story of in the Old Testament where the man was gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and God said through Moses that the man must die for violating the rules of the Sabbath. So the people took him outside the camp and they stoned him. When this class got to the New Testament a few days later, the little boy heard the story of the Pharisees coming to Jesus to complain that the disciples were picking corn on the Sabbath. And God said through Jesus, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." At that point, the little boy cried out, "Boy, God sure did get nicer in his old age, didn't he?" Yeah, it's a child's perception. So I don't know about that, but I'll tell you, the metaphors in the Bible from the Old to the New really got a lot more gentle. They really did. Maybe it was all about the storytelling and keeping people. You know, why do people today go to the movies to see horror flicks and some of these things that have you on the edge of your seat?
Well, the people of the times may become more sophisticated also.
It's true. You didn't need to have as much action and gore to get the message through. You know, you're right. As the people evolved, the stories evolved. Mm-hmm. And so...
Well, I think it's a choice, too. I mean,
well,
people choose to go see horror movies. Some people choose never to go and go see comedies.
That's true.
Or westerns, or we all have... Favorites.
Well, the question is, and was, did God change? Was it God that changed?
No.
Or was it man's perception and man's belief? I think we know the answer to that. And it was man's belief about God as they grew and as we are continually growing. Don't you think we've even changed our perception of God in the last 200 years? I think so, especially with the transcendental movement and New Thought. Well, despite the gruesome nature of the story of Samson and Delilah, it serves beautifully today for my framework for looking at flexing our spiritual muscle, which is what we're talking about today. For looking at what it takes to be spiritually strong. And there's actually a book that is great called Spiritual Boot Camp. It's got some pretty, kind of like boot camps, kind of an interesting thing. But that's another talk. So Holmes, on page 463 of The Science of Mind, says, "We are strong only when united with life. When we separate ourselves from the divine fire," which is what Samson did when he succumbed to the temptation, "we become an isolated spark." What does it take to stay united with life, to stay spiritually strong, to flex our spiritual muscles? This morning I'm going to suggest three things. It takes focus, it takes discipline, and it takes deliberate choices, all of which work together for our good. So let's start with focus. The three are focus, discipline, and deliberate choices. Okay? So we're going to start with focus. The Master Teacher Jesus tells us at Matthew 6:22, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body will be filled with light." It's kind of keeping your eye on the ball. And your whole body will be filled with light. If thine eye be single, that's our idea of focus. Samson's eye strayed, didn't it? He succumbed to the temptation. He took his eye off of the purpose of his life. And so what is it with us? Where is our focus? What is our purpose in our life? Are we focused on that? Do we have our eye on that singly? Is it on love and on truth and beauty and health and abundance and joy and harmony and peace? Is that where we're keeping our focus? Is that where our eyes are? Or is it elsewhere? In the application of The Science of Mind by Holmes and Willis Kinnear, page 19 and 20, they say, a change in our way of thinking is a must if we would have a richer, fuller, more enjoyable life. We need to learn to affirm only the things we desire, not what we do not want. We need to think on these things. Life is good, not against us. Health is normal, and the natural state of our bodies. God always succeeds, and so should we. The universe is abundant in all good things, and so should be our lives. It is only through the affirming and the accepting of these things in our pattern of thinking that they may become our experience. Jesus said that a thorn bush could not produce a grape or a thistle produce figs. A cat cannot give birth to a dog, nor can a cow produce a kitten. Neither can thoughts of hate create a life filled with love, nor thoughts of limitation provide a life of plenty. And in this thing called you, Holmes says, if you can see God in everything, then God will look back at you through everything. When the time comes that nothing goes forth from you other than that which you would be glad to have return, then you will have reached your heaven. Isn't that a wonderful goal to have? When the time comes that nothing goes forth from you other than that which you would be glad to have returned, then you will have reached your heaven. Sounds a little like the golden rule, doesn't it? So how's that for focus? Having nothing go forth from your thoughts, your words, your emotions, your reactions that you would not have gladly returned. I think about that and I think, wow, sometimes when I'm short, when I'm impatient, when I'm, kind of snappy, I won't go into it, but I don't want that returned. So that's something to think about. But I admit that kind of focus takes discipline, and that's our second idea this morning. So we're moving on to discipline. What is the definition of discipline? Carrying out a resolution long after the mood has left. How many of you get gung-ho and you start something and you're all fired up and then, oh look, something's on TV. We're distracted. We're easily distracted, or something else comes up, or I'm happy. Everything's going well, and somebody cuts you off, and it's gone. It's we've got to keep that resolution even after the mood has left. So research shows us that it takes a minimum of 21 days of consistent action to turn something around. We've done that with our no complaint bracelets. We've done that with diets. We've done that with anything we've wanted, any habit we wanted to change. We've set that goal for 21 days. And, when we repeat a negative behavior, it does become a bad habit. If you do it over and over again, it does develop into a bad habit. And so to move out of the negative conditioning, to break the habit, to make a permanent change, we need to resolve to stick to the discipline of new behavior for 21 days. In these 21 days, we literally regroove the brain, those little neuron pathways, and create the new neural pathways in our brains. In Holmes' Creative Mind and Success, he says that we need more backbone and less wishbone. I like that. We need more backbone and less wishbone. So more backbone to give up that habitual negativity. More backbone to focus on the kingdom of heaven instead of the hell we may be experiencing at the moment. But that isn't how it really works for a lot of us. How often are we like Samson, who became vexed to death and blurted out the secret of his strength to Delilah? In other words, we stick with our singular focus for a while, but then we get tired of it, right? We get tired, we get vexed to death, and we quit, and we start whining either verbally or mentally about the problem. So we are wishing for a change, but we have not the mental discipline to create it. And that's what Holmes means by having more backbone than wishbone. It's imperative to stick with your focus as long as it takes. How many people have done a diet and then, given up after a while and just returned to where they were? Yeah, you didn't stick with it and for as long as it takes. And me. Thomas Edison said, many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And that's, which book was that in? It was in the the one about the traveler's gift, when he reaches the storehouses in heaven. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on forever. And he walks around and there's the cure for cancer. And there's all the clothing for the poor. And there's all the medicine to heal everyone. And he says, what is all this? He says, these were ideas that people had but didn't follow through. They were this close. And there they are in this storehouse. It's kind of an interesting concept to think of that. We need spiritual focus and then spiritual discipline, combined with, our last one, deliberate choice. And yes, you have a choice. We each and every one of us have a choice. Samson made a choice that sent him down a really unpleasant road. In Deuteronomy, we read this stirring command, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. Make that deliberate choice. Choose life. So a bit more modern, these are the words from Goethe, and he says, I've come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. I possess tremendous power to make life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it's my response that decides whether a crisis is escalated or de-escalated, and a person is humanized or dehumanized. If we treat people as they are, we make them worse. If we treat people as they ought to be, we help them become what they are capable of becoming. And even more modern, this is from Dr. Joe Dispenza from the movie What the Bleep Do We Know on creating his day. I wake up in the morning and I consciously create my day the way I want it to happen. Now, sometimes my mind is examining all of the things that I need to get done, and it takes me a little bit of time to settle it down and get to the point of where I'm actually intentionally creating my day. But here's the thing. When I create my day out of nowhere, little things happen that are so unexplainable. I know that they are the process or the result of my creation. And the more I do that, the more I build a neural net in my brain. And I accept that that's possible. It gives me the power and the incentive to do it the next day. So if we're consciously designing our destiny, if we're consciously, from a spiritual standpoint, throwing in what that idea that our thoughts can actually affect our reality or affect our life, because reality equates life, then I have this pact that I have when I create my day. I say, I am taking this time to create my day and I am infecting the quantum field. Now, if it is a fact that the observer is watching me the whole time and I'm doing this, then there's a spiritual aspect to myself. Then show me a sign today that you paid attention to any one of these things I created and bring them in a way that I won't expect. So I'm surprised at my ability to be able to experience these things and make it so that I have no doubt that it has come from you. And so I live my life, in a sense, all day long thinking about being a genius, or thinking about being the glory and power of God, or thinking about being unconditional love. I'll use living as a genius, for example, and as I do that, during parts of my day, I have thoughts that are so amazing, that cause a chill in my physical body that have come from nowhere. But then I remember that that thought has an associated energy that's produced an effect in my physical body. Now that's a subjective experience, but the truth is, I don't think that unless I was creating my day to have unlimited thought, that the thought would come. So that's what he puts forth, and What the Bleep Do We Know. We should watch that again. It's been a while since we've watched that. That would be an interesting movie to see again. We have a choice how we create our lives. We have a choice how we view the world. A story is told of a Jewish man who is riding on the subway reading an Arab newspaper. This is good. A friend of his, who happened to be riding in the same subway car, noticed this strange phenomenon, and he, very upset, he approached the newspaper reader. Moshe, have you lost your mind? Why are you reading an Arab newspaper? Moshe replied, I used to read the Jewish newspaper, but what did I find? Jews being persecuted, Israel being attacked, Jews disappearing through assimilation and intermarriage, Jews living in poverty. So I switched to the Arab newspaper. Now what do I find? Jews own all the banks. Jews control the media. Jews are all rich and powerful. Jews rule the world. The news is so much better. I want to find a paper like that. Where do we find a paper like that? Remember astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Edgar Mitchell, who traveled to the moon? They journeyed to the moon together. Aldrin returned from the moon feeling that there was nothing left to be achieved. He'd made his goal. He was done. Life, it seemed, was over. He had a breakdown in which there was a long struggle for sanity. On the other hand, Mitchell, as we know, went on to explore the non-material dimensions of mind and spirit. He became very much involved in the human potential movement and with the spiritual research of all kinds. He's considered a pioneer in modern efforts to expand the role of science toward understanding the inner experience. He's the founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, IONS, and he has received the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the NASA Distinguished Service Medal. He once wrote, I believe that our deepest beliefs change not only the way we relate to the world, but virtually change the physical world that we live in. So what are your deliberate choices? What are we deliberately choosing today? I began today with an illustration of someone who lost his spiritual muscle. I'd love to end with some examples of how people right here in our spiritual community have used their spiritual muscle. Polly used, and I'll share Polly because she's not here, she used her discipline and her incredible focus to obtain her real estate license just recently. I mean, this is just a recent one. And is now listing homes and attracting clients. People are calling her and she's showing. And see, there's Polly right now, looking, you know. And people are so grateful for her focus and her intense desire to find them their new home. It's just a joy to see that. You know, she put her set her intention, put it forward, and it's making it happen. Does anyone else have a story to share? Anybody else have something where they put their focus and they completed it and they did it?
I don't have it yet, but it just inspired me to focus.
Okay.
Not think about something not thinking about something else. I'm going to focus on what I want to think.
What about, you've got a great example. Your boat.
Well, yeah.
You focused on that, and you had incredible discipline in researching and finding, and you followed up. You didn't get distracted.
True.
And the result is you have a fabulous boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. You completed your stories. You're still re-editing them, but you've also made the goal to put them out to editors. And so that's a process. Ed has a job interview tomorrow. So we're knowing that this is a right and perfect job, right? So this is great. Any other things that you can think of? You set your intention for your kitty to come home, and you kept your focus on that cat.
When I found out the fact that I worked together with your experience, when I found out the focus that you gave me, and you were really amazing.
But you had to focus too. See, you had to choose it.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
cats. You know.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. So what does it take to exercise our spiritual muscle? It takes increased alignment with spirit, the increased faith in the idea that we are creators of our own experience, and the increased awareness that God is working in our lives all of the time. These are the real benefits of our flexing our spiritual muscles, just knowing that God's working in our lives all the time. So again, everyone, flex your biceps. Come on, use this as a reminder this week. Every morning, get up and do this in the mirror and say, you know, I'm flexing my muscles, but I choose to flex my spiritual muscles. Choose to do this as you sizzle with spirit this summer and take it with you all year long. And so it is.